What is absolutely clear is that in advancing the interests of the outgoing U.S. administration, that team advancing the interests of the U.S. outgoing administration is not even trying to create a semblance of compliance with the rules of the Security Council. They are seeking to advance a single goal, to cement their ideological priorities at the Security Council. The Council should not become a platform for American inter-party conflict or campaign rallies. But this happened because the United States, instead of fighting against terrorism, has been encouraging terrorism, and for all of these years have provided cover for and whitewashed HTS terrorists.
A very, very small group of states present in this chamber would obviously prefer to hide the truth about the Assad regime's repeated use of chemical weapons against the Syrian people. The Russian statement this morning was a sad moment for this council. We heard nothing but lies, pathological prevarication, personal attacks. The statement was right out of the Russian playbook.
Before this meeting is to begin, I wish to once again draw the attention of the Security Council membership to the fact that the first week of the U.S. presidency of the Security Council has been punctuated by such egregious procedural violations and clumsy manipulations that they would suffice for the entire year ahead of us. What is absolutely clear is that in advancing the interests of the outgoing U.S. administration, that team advancing the interests of the U.S. outgoing administration is not even trying to create a semblance of compliance with the rules of the Security Council. They are seeking to advance a single goal, to cement their ideological priorities at the Security Council platform. For the sake of this, for the third consecutive day, the Security Council has had heinous repertoires from civil society imposed upon it. Not only do they not provide any added value to this discussion, but through their emotionally charged, unsubstantiated monologues, they have transformed meetings of the Security Council into a farce. And this is precisely what the international community observed on Tuesday during the meeting on the situation on Syria, when well-known fabricators and liars were invited from the White Helmets NGO were invited to participate in the Security Council meeting. And the same egregious situation was repeated yesterday during the meeting on the issue of children in the context of the Ukrainian crisis, where effectively a whole three representatives of NGOs spoke. We are perfectly aware that the individual represented, seated at the Ukrainian seat is a representative of civil society, and we did not see any confirmation of how this individual was in any way authorized to speak on behalf of a state. It is clear that in order to avoid awkward questions, the presidency did not deem it necessary, contrary to established practice, to inform members of the Security Council in advance that not a permanent representative will speak under Rule 37. Not a permanent representative of a state will speak under Rule 37. This was not something that the Council was informed of. And the list of speakers circulated, this individual was not on that list of speakers. There is no doubt that today's briefer from civil society will also advance Washington's manuals and adhere to them, and will not provide any new perspective for the consideration of the issue on the agenda. What is the point of wasting the Council's members' time on this farce? We are very much concerned about all of this in terms of the fact that this undermines the authority of the Security Council. The Council should not become a platform for American inter-party conflict or campaign rallies. If the entire month continues based on what we have, in the same way that this week has advanced, if the U.S. presidency continues to generously provide airtimes at the Council to myriad propagandists, crooks engaged in and PR for their advisors and public relations representatives, then the entire month of January will become the Security Council will transform in the month of January into a cheap talk show. And this will have catastrophic consequences, not just for the reputation of the Security Council, but also when it comes to the crises on the ground. We call upon the presidency to give this some thought, and for the membership of the Security Council not to indulge such behavior. Thank you.
Let me just say very briefly, a very, very small group of states present in this chamber would obviously prefer to hide the truth about the Assad regime's repeated use of chemical weapons against the Syrian people. The truth cannot be hidden. The perpetrators of these acts will not be able to hide. They will be held accountable. And Mr. Shkani, thank you for your contribution to this effort to hold the perpetrators accountable. Let me add one other thing before going into my statement. The Russian statement this morning was a sad moment for this council. We heard nothing but lies, pathological prevarication, personal attacks. The statement was right out of the Russian playbook. Blame others, ridicule the professionalism of the international mechanisms and their employees, and then claim as illegitimate the findings of these international bodies, and then state that any future evidence of chemical weapons use is not to be trusted because of its political nature. Colleagues, the United States is closely monitoring the situation in Aleppo and Idlib and are in contact with partners on the ground. We have seen some reports of human rights abuses, and we hope to see those now in control of Aleppo and Idlib hold those accountable who have perpetrated these abuses and promote fair and equal rights and access to resources. The litmus test for any government is the way the most vulnerable populations are treated. The events currently unfolding in Syria are a reminder of the relevance of the Council's regular meetings on Syrian chemical weapons and the continued applicability of Resolutions 2118 and 2254. Indeed, it is in situations like the one we face today, when the Assad regime feels most at risk, and this is important, that the regime previously unleashed chemical weapons on its own people. Over the years, the Assad regime and its backers have attempted to distort the truth through lies and elaborate campaigns of misinformation about these chemical weapons attacks and those who have documented them. The facts are obvious, and no one should be fooled by these cheap tricks. Investigations by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons Investigation and Identification Team and the UN OPCW Joint Investigative Mechanism impartially and independently confirmed that the Syrian regime was responsible for 9 chemical weapons attacks. The Director General of the OPCW is clear on this. To this day, the Syrian regime has not declared all elements of its chemical weapons program as required by the Chemical Weapons Convention. These elements include large quantities of chemical warfare agents and munitions, but the OPCW cannot verify what happened to them because Syria refuses to answer inspectors' questions. Equally concerning is the fact that, per the OPCW Director General, the Syrian Arab Republic failed to sufficiently explain traces of undeclared chemical warfare agents in samples collected in 2020, 2023, and 2024. Consequently, the OPCW Director General has concluded that, and I quote, "Despite more than a decade of intensive work, the Syrian Arab Republic chemical weapons dossier still cannot be closed." End of quote. As we said last week at the OPCW's 29th Conference of the States Parties, if Syria had the capacity to produce chemical weapons, then it has the capacity to tell the world what happened to them. Colleagues, at this moment, when we see the regime and its backers ramping up attacks on civilians in Aleppo and Idlib, our message is simple. The eyes of the international community are on you and will remain on you until justice and accountability are reached. The United States firmly believes the Security Council must remain seized of the Syrian chemical weapons dossier. Syria's chemical weapons program is not a relic of the past. It is a threat to international peace and security. Let's not ignore the facts. Uncovered at great cost by organizations like the White Helmets and independently and impartially confirmed by OPCW and the UN. Let's not forget that Resolution 2118 includes decisions that all UN member states must carry out, and it establishes obligations on the Syrian regime that are still valid today. And let's not forget Resolution 2118's call for those responsible for the use of chemical weapons in Syria to be held to account. The United States, therefore, calls on all member states to implement without delay the recommended collective measures called for in the decision by the OPCW Conference of the States Parties in 2023, including those aiming to prevent the transfer to Syria of certain dual-use chemicals and equipment. And we call on member states to join us in seeking justice for those injured and killed in chemical weapons attacks in Syria. There must be no impunity for the use of chemical weapons anywhere, at any time, by anyone, under any circumstances.
I listened with interest to your emotionally charged statement. I won't comment on your inappropriate and undiplomatic description of our statement. I would simply like to note some points. First, you completely mendaciously presented the reason behind what is transpiring currently in Syria, where the internationally recognized terrorists, designated terrorists, attacked a sovereign state, and this did not happen. This did not happen because the Syrian government has been failing to comply with certain resolutions, but this happened because the United States, instead of fighting against terrorism, has been encouraging terrorism, and for all of these years have provided cover for and whitewashed HTS terrorists. And now they are undertaking robust steps in order to requalify these thugs into some kind of rebels. We've been observing this, and we are all very much ashamed by this, Mr. President. Furthermore, you mentioned certain so-called evidence which exists related to the Syrian chemical weapons program, and I wish to remind you, Mr. President, of the fact that when the U.S. side talks about certain evidence, then the world remembers the picture. One of your former Secretary of States here had a vial, was showing a vial of some substance and talked about clear evidence of certain chemical weapon substances in Iraq. You also mentioned the need for punishment of all and ensuring that justice and accountability, that there be justice and accountability, as you so enjoy referring to. But I would also like to remind you that now justice, American style, is associated for the entire world with this situation when the U.S. president, who has sought to cling to power for the past months and days, abusing his power, has pardoned his criminal son, and everybody, despite the fact that it was stated that he would never do that. So before you deliver such hawkish statements, Mr. President, please remember how this is perceived. Consider how this is perceived throughout the entire world. Thank you.